In this episode, we're speaking with author Donna Parker, who wrote the book Death in Dutch Harbor. I came across Donna at the Pacific Marine Expo 2023 in Seattle, and her booth was all sold out. She had no more books left, so sadly, I wasn't able to read it. So we're going to go through this interview together, but you got to hear some of her background right now. It's really incredible. So first, we're going to discuss her writing process. Of course, I'm a writer. You know I nerd out on that. Next, we're going to talk about her experience as a fisherman. She's also been a fisherman who survived a boat that sunk off of the coast of Kodiak, y'all, for real. And she also has an experience as a partner of a commercial fisherman. So, you know, this hits all the high notes in my book. And, you know, they say that writers need experiences to write. And Donna seems to have all that and more for multiple volumes of books. I hope y'all enjoy this one. I'm Megan Waldrop, host of the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast, an extension of an online community created for partners to connect worldwide, find helpful resources, and share stories to feel less alone in this incredibly unique and adventurous way of life. The POCF podcast invites fishermen, family, friends, supporters, or those curious to know more about the commercial fishing community to join conversations as we learn from each other, laugh, sometimes cry, and relate with those who are the faces behind each catch. What do you say? Let's dive in. I'm so happy to be talking to you, Donna, because it's been since Pacific Marine Expo and I came to your booth and saw that all your books were gone. So that's even better. As a writer myself, I could talk about writing all day, and having Donna on is just such a treat. So thank you so much for your time and being with us. And I'd love to know, where are you speaking to us from today?
I'm speaking to you from our home near Seattle.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. So in the lower 48.
Yes.
Awesome.
We lived in Alaska for many years, but we live in the Seattle area now. And in fact, we're both retired.
You're both retired. And is that retired from commercial fishing?
Retired in general, but we're still having a lot of fun. I'm writing books. My husband's in his workshop now building a sailboat.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it. Boat life forever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was interested to learn that you were a fisherman at one point. So How did you get involved in commercial fishing? What drew you to that profession?
I grew up in New England and I always wanted to go to Alaska. And I was about 30 when I finally said, this is it, time to go. And I was a journalist back there. And so I picked up my dog and my little personal computer and headed to Alaska. And so I had a list of things I wanted to do: raft rivers, climb mountains, ski in remote areas, go fishing, work in hunting camps, all the things that you could think of that you'd want to do in a place like Alaska. And I did most of them. One of them was to work in a bush newspaper. And I got a job in Kodiak, working on the Kodiak Daily Mirror. And I was also freelancing for Alaska magazine and whatnot. And so I went out on a halibut opening and wrote a feature story about that. And I just fell in love with the sea. I just loved being at sea. It was magical. I'd never felt up close and personal with Mother Nature. I learned she wasn't very maternal, but to be that close to the elements and feel the kind of camaraderie you feel in a fishing boat where you depend on people for your life was something that was breathtaking to me. So I left my job and went fishing, and I fished for a couple of years. So,
wow, that is such a huge jump to go from, an isolating, I feel, trade, which is journalism, even though you get to, meet people, you get to interview, but, most of the time it's just you and your thoughts creating on the page, and then going to where you're working side by side with a team. Was that transition? How was that transition from going from like kind of a stationary, job to one that is a very physical, demanding occupation?
I never thought about it that way. My life has always been pretty adventurous, and so this was another adventure. It was strenuous. I mean, I was in good shape. I skied and jogged and stuff. I like being outdoors, and but fishing is heavy duty work, and so I enjoyed the challenge and I enjoyed the people. And, it wasn't that long before I actually met the man who was to become my husband and still is. And we shared that life. Sometimes we work on the same boat, sometimes different. Um, but it was a great partnership then and now.
Oh, so where did y'all meet?
In Kodiak, Alaska, I went when I decided I was going to go fishing. I was walking the docks looking for a job, and at that time I didn't really know it. I didn't know anything about fishing, so I figured my entry key was to be a cook. So I was looking for big boats with big crews that needed a cook, and I was at the king crab dock looking down. It was low tide, so big boat down beneath me, and I shouted down, "Does your boat need a cook?" And he looked up at me and he said, "I sure hope so." uh, uh, and I got a job on that boat, and that was eventually became my husband.
That is so beautiful. That is a beautiful commercial fishing romance story right there. I visualized.
I think it's a little. It almost sounds too good to be true, but it was. It was slow to get started, but it started right at the beginning.
Wow. Instant life. You have a new career and a new love. That's beautiful. Okay. So we're going to talk about your experience as a partner of a commercial fisherman later on, which I love that you have the perspective of not only a writer, but also a fisherman and a partner of a commercial fisherman. But we're going to talk about your book that has had so much praise. And I want to read from your press kit because it really sums up a lot. It says, Parker's been on the ground as a fisherman, a state of Alaska fisheries specialist, and a seafood company executive. She survived a sinking boat off the coast of Kodiak, Alaska, and many rough and tumble fishery management meetings and her share of beer at the Elbow Room, once famous as Alaska's most dangerous bar. And you were quoted as saying, "When I retired, I wanted to recycle all that good stuff into great yarn." And that is just so intriguing. And I have to say, I can't wait to read your book. I need to read it. I wasn't able to because it was sold out. So if that tells the listeners anything, it means that this book is guaranteed to be a page turner. So I would love to know, okay. First of all, can you walk us through what it was like the day that your boat sank off of Kodiak? What in the heck? How was that? What happened?
Well, it all started. My husband and I were over at a buddy's house smoking and pickling salmon. That's an all-day event, right? And afternoon rolled around, and he owned a couple of boats, a salmon seiner and a big limit seiner. And the captain who was driving the big boat called him up and said he'd lost a crew member. He had to get back out again. And so I volunteered. It was a beautiful boat. It was working as a tender then, which is a pretty easy job for fishing. And so I was happy to help out. So I went down there. We took off. Sun was setting. It was getting dark. We had to get to the east side of Kodiak. And I could tell right away that the skipper was tired. And, I offered to drive the boat. And he said, well, after we get through Whale Pass, which is notorious for its currents and rocks. It's, you're not going to let someone you don't know drive the boat. And I said, fine. And so there was just the captain, me, and another crew member. And so I just went to my bunk and caught up on some sleep until I got tossed out of the bunk. And I ran up to the wheelhouse, and there we were. The bow was pointing towards the sky, and this big navigational marker, big red light, is blinking right on the starboard side of the bow. So what he had done, he'd fallen asleep at the wheel and run aground to this huge rock. The mistake he made was backing off of it, and there was a big gash in the bottom, and the boat was sinking pretty fast. I looked in the engine room, was already half full of water. he and the other crew member went to the top of the wheelhouse and grabbed the Zodiac skiff, tossed it on the deck. I went and grabbed some survival suits and put them over the side and got in, let loose a flare. He'd already done a Mayday. There's a lot of traffic in Whale Pass, and and there was a full moon. It was really a lovely night. We were very lucky. It's just that it happened so quick. The boat went down in minutes, and we just paddled away to get away from the suction and watched the bow go down as the last item we saw there. And we were picked up within the hour, and I remember them throwing blankets over us, giving us some hot coffee. Took a few hours to get home. I don't have much memory of that part. Quite frankly, it happened so fast that we hardly had time to be scared. We just knew what we had to do. We got in that boat and, we didn't have to worry about the weather. So everything ended gracefully, in a manner of speaking.
Wow. That's amazing that you were able to react that quickly, and I'm so glad
you don't have you don't have a choice. Every fisherman knows you got to do your job. You got to think quickly, and it's always good. I'm sure your listeners, the practice drills on the boat. You know how to use a survival suit, get in and out of it quickly, and it's an important safety aboard a fishing boat is important to know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So with these experiences under your belt, what was the moment that you said, all right, I'm going to start writing again, and I'm not going to just do journalism, which is completely different than writing a book, a novel. What made you say, I'm going to write a book now?
Well, that was a long time later, or a long time earlier. If you're a writer, most people who write eventually want to write a book, and you pretty much get hooked on writing when you're pretty young. So I would say I probably wanted to write a book since about fourth grade or something. So I had that in mind. I knew, writing a book was not going to be easy, and it could be a lonely and unlucrative task. So I decided I needed a deadline, and that's why I got a degree in journalism and practiced that trade for a while. And then fishing, caused a big change in my life. I spent many years writing letters on regulatory proposals, which didn't have which weren't that creative. But I always knew I'd get back to it, And so, in preparation for my retirement, I started writing the book, and that meant I joined a writing group. I took writing classes in fiction, and throughout my life, I wrote short stories here and there whenever I had time. Anyway, so I just decided I was going to do it, and I did it. I had a problem. I learned how to write a book. I wrote the book, and the hardest part was getting it published, not writing it. And there's many things you can do to make this task easier. I'd be happy to go into that if you'd like to do that. But was pretty much how it unfolded for me. And I can't tell you how much fun it was. I mean, writing a book is really fun.
So, and it's a crime mystery novel. So what made you go into the crime mystery genre?
Well, it's a genre I love to read. And it also, quite frankly, seemed like the simplest genre for somebody who hadn't written a book before, because the plot is pretty clear. Murders occur, they have to get solved. Okay, so you have the basic outline there, big trajectory. Then you have to figure about character development and subplots and all that sort of stuff, and the technical structure of writing a book. But I thought it was an arc that I could understand, and it would provide the sort of structure I needed to be able to concentrate on the harder stuff. So that worked out for me, and I enjoyed doing it. And of course, I love reading those types of books. So it was fun to see how they're done.
Yeah. I love it. And so I love how everybody's writing process is so unique. And I would love to understand, what was your writing and creative process? For example, what time of day did you write? Was there a time of day that it was better to write than others? Did you write on legal pads, notebooks? Were you typing on the computer? Was it on the journals? And, we'll start there and then I'll throw some other ones at you. But yeah, what was your process like? Are you a morning writer? How did you get in the zone?
When I was younger, I used to be a night person, but for something like writing, it's really a morning exercise. I think it certainly is for me, and most writers I speak to, it is, because you're more in touch with your subconscious. You woke up in the morning, your mind hasn't been polluted with the practicalities of real life. And so I never wrote more than a few hours a day. And I would sit down with my coffee and think, and then start writing. I would write a scene at a time. And because of my journalism background, I never had writer's block. I write pretty quickly because words aren't precious to me. I'm used to deleting them. I'm used to, it's like somebody who's good in math. They can deal with an equation, no problem. To me, if I finished the equation, it would be monumental. I'd frame it, it'd be a big thing. But people who aren't familiar with writing, I think they get writer's block because they're afraid to commit. And I'm lucky to not have that problem. So I'll often I start with a setting I have I set myself in the scene I'm going to write. And I start writing about the setting. And because Alaska is really one of the main characters in the book, that's always pretty interesting. And sometimes I would go back and delete the first couple of paragraphs as if it was a warm-up exercise. But the fun part for me was I knew when I sat down what was going to happen by the end of the scene. Because it's a murder mystery, you have to have a clue, you have to have a red herring, something has to move the story forward. Oftentimes I had no idea what it was. And so I would just sit down there and start writing. First, I put myself in the place, and then, whoa, somebody walk in. It was as if my brain was at my fingertips. And it was a fun adventure for me. I'd be laughing as I was writing. Oh, I'd be surprised when I was writing. When there would be some plot twist that would come to me out of the air, seemingly. I couldn't believe it. I mean, there were some times when I just got up, walked in the bathroom, looked at the mirror, and said, "You are brilliant." Because this masterful turn of events occurred in the book that surprised me as much as anyone. And so that's where I said the fun part comes in. But you can't do it right unless you understand story structure. Every scene has a structure. There's a very objective structure. You have an inciting incident, then it gets complicated. The hero has to overcome those until you get to some big climactic thing that causes a decision. Decision has to occur, and that's how you get to know the character. You don't tell the reader about the character. The character is revealed through the decisions he or she makes. And then after that decision is made, that's a big turning point in the scene. And then there's a resolution to it. So these are very specific components. And once you learn that, take off, write a scene at a time. The scene, I'm done. And it's so nice to bring your scene to the group and read it aloud. Sounds a lot different then, and get constructive feedback. It was nice having that deadline, and everybody is committed to share and be constructive. So between taking great classes online, you can learn you don't have to get an MFA. There are great ones out there. I use StoryGrid, which was really worked for me because it was very objective goals instead of subjective ones. Either you included it or you didn't. Check it off the list. And then you just have to go through the story structure, and then all of a sudden you go around the corner and you go, "Oh my God, I'm approaching the end," and the pace changes and whatnot, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, that's it, I'm done. So I'm what what I've described to you is a process that makes me a pantser. I operate by the seat of my pants. I have a very minimal plot that I know ahead of time. It's an adventure for me. Other people are plotters. They plot everything out, or they plot some of it out. There's all degrees of it. I think something in between those two is works. So you know where you're going, but you're also having fun doing it.
Oh, it's so great. And you hit on so many points that I just really love. I love that you talk about writers groups, because I also find a lot of value in them. And you're right. It is a whole different ballgame when you read your stories out loud. Like that's when you see the holes and why it feels clunky and how you can make it smoother. I love that. And then I love that you gave yourself a deadline, because that's also super important. Personally, I also started writing as a journalist, and deadlines, I've lived by them. They're the markers to get things done. So I was
Absolutely.
wondering what was your deadline? Like, how much time did you give yourself to write a scene?
Well, I had one very real deadline. The writers group met once a week. So I had to have a scene ready for that. I mean, I didn't have to, but I wanted to. So sometimes I'd only work, 1 or 2 mornings, especially when I was still working. There was an overlap when I was writing the book of about a year when I was still working. And so I would make sure that I had a scene that I was proud of. So I'd written the first draft and I'd revised it at a minimum. And I would do that once a week. And so it's great having that structure to your writing life. So it didn't overwhelm me. It wasn't a job. It was fun. So maybe I would do it 2 mornings a week.
Wow. And then just to clarify for others too, a scene does not equate a chapter exactly, correct? So
Correct.
how long did it take for you to write the entire book?
Oh, the first draft took me less than 2 years. And one of those years I was working. So it's the revising, because especially since I was a pantser, it took me longer than that. I revised it many times, especially when I learned more about writing structure. I started out knowing very little about those technical things that were very important. Things you don't think about, but readers unconsciously expect. And if you don't include them, your story is not going to work. And so I had a million revisions. And so it probably took me about 4 years yeah. And then I had to go out and, find an agent, find a publisher. That's not fun.
Yeah. That's the unsexy part of writing, the business of writing a book. And before we go on those notes, I wanted to say, I really appreciated your point about writer's block, because I 100% agree with you. I don't believe in writer's block. I think writer's block is a fear of making a crappy draft. I think
exactly.
Writer's block is just your ego stopping you from putting any words on a page. Even I think it was Maya Angelou said when she would write, she would sometimes sit at her desk and just write, I like cats. I like dogs. Like she would just write these simple sentences just to get her brain going. Kind of like what you were saying, like you wrote and then you deleted some of those paragraphs before because that just got your juices going. And yeah, I feel like writer's block can be such a easy excuse to not be creative, because it is scary to be creative sometimes, because you are putting your heart out there. You're putting, your insides outside for people to eventually judge and hopefully be entertained and enjoy. So yes, the deadlines are helpful for the writer's block, because if you have a deadline, you don't have time to have a writer's block. You have to get your work in. So
just do it. That's 3 words. Just do it. You can always change it. You can always make it better, but you need something to start with, and don't let your ego get in the way.
I love that. Okay. So let's talk about the unsexy part. So then if people, if you're not familiar, and I've learned this over the years, I didn't know this right away, but to get your book published, you need to start with an agent. A lot of publishing houses won't even look at you. They won't accept cold manuscripts, they call it. I think you need to have an agent as your middleman to get you to the next step. So first of all, what made you want to go that route instead of self-publishing?
because I knew nothing about publishing or marketing a book. I wanted it to be done by a professional, and I really had no interest in learning it. I had interest in learning how to write a book, but not in the publishing business. Um, so I got a book on how to find an agent. I've got together my list, got together my query letter, all that sort of thing, and went to a conference where you talk to agents and whatnot. And surprisingly, it didn't take me that long to find an agent. I was surprised. And so the agents are, you're right, they're the ones that get you into the big five. The publishing business is dominated by 5 publishers, and they're all in New York City. And so what happened to me was they knew the editors for their genre, which is a little bit different than my book. They really marketed cozy mysteries. And my book has a lot of elements of a cozy mystery, which is small town, amateur sleuth. My protagonist is a veterinarian who's been called on by the chief of police in a remote fishing port to help, with forensic work and solving 2 murders. Oh, there you go, Agatha Christie and Miss Marple. That's a cozy mystery. But mine's a little bit more edgy than that, so it's definitely more edgy than that. And as it's set in commercial fishing, and Miss Marple doesn't roam around in commercial fishing industry. So there I was between 2 genres, and that they didn't like that. The publishers don't like that. The agents don't like that. They want to go to specific people with very specific genre preferences. And so they sent it out and talked to their editors they had relationships with, and there would be there's a number of imprints or sub publishers, publishing houses within the larger ones, that specialize. And so I would get great feedback from them. I think, oh, wow, they're going to buy the book. They say so many good things about it. But then they go, oh, but this doesn't quite fit into the genre. Or we already have a mystery writer about Alaska. Or, we have a veterinarian protagonist. We don't want to compete with our own author, stuff like that. Eventually, they made the rounds and nobody bought it. And that was disheartening. So I had to decide then what to do. I wasn't ready to go to self-publishing because I really was ignorant about how to get it done properly. And so I went to the smaller publishers, and I found an independent publisher that loved the book and wanted to publish it. And so that's what I did.
Amazing. Congratulations. That's such a huge feat. I feel like writing a query letter deserves an applause anyway. Can you explain to everyone what a query letter is, please?
Well, you write a letter of inquiry to a agent or to a publisher, depending what you're looking for. And it has to be substantive, but it can't be long. And each agent and each publisher have different requirements. So it's not like you can get a bunch of them together and send them out. And some of them even have the audacity that they only want you to query one at a time, yet they take months to get back to you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But they all have different requirements. Some want 10 pages, some want 20 pages, some want the first 3 chapters, so everyone has to be individualized. And of course, you try and find out something about that publishing company or that agent, or something that sets you apart. But you can get books on this, how to write a query letter, and they're very specific, and you follow the instructions. And it could be tricky figuring out how to make your query letter stand out, because they get hundreds of these. So that's the tricky part. And I'm not sure why mine stuck out with some, or some I never even got a response with, so they didn't stick out. So I'm afraid I can't give you a very precise answer on what works and what not works, but you have to be very specific because if you're not following their instructions, they won't even read it because they know you're not paying attention.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a great piece of advice because the query letter I feel like is another a little hurdle, but it is one that you need to understand that you have to write, and it is time consuming even after you've written your beautiful book. It's like, oh wait, there's still more writing to be done. Okay, so I wanted to ask, did you write solely on a computer? Were you taking notes on paper? How did you get your book together?
When I was home, I wrote on a computer. It's just easier to do, easier to delete, modify, revise, whatever. But I would also write uh, when I was traveling. So I wrote on legal pad, when I was on an airplane. And so I can do both, but I prefer computer just because there's so many revisions involved. But writing on a pad of paper, get your ideas out there, something to do.
Yes.
While you're sitting around waiting in the airport or on an airplane or wherever it is you're waiting.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. So how did you research your book? Because on your notes, I read that, you lived in Kodiak and Juneau for many years, but you chose Dutch Harbor for your story. So could you explain to us your research and your idea around why Dutch Harbor?
Well, those are really two questions, and I'll tackle both of them. Research, I didn't have to do too much research because I was very involved in the fishing industry for 30 years. So I liked that part. I wanted to get to the creative writing part. I had so many stories to share. There was a trove inside my brain, plus my husband, an excellent resource, and and my friends. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on research, but I did sometimes. There's a police dog in this, and I just called up the Seattle Canine Unit, and they invited me out to their training facility with all their big German shepherds and everything, because the protagonist has a three-legged German shepherd that used to be a police dog, and I wanted everything in this book to be authentic, including how you address a police dog. And they were great. In fact, the dog is named Coco after one of the dogs at the training facility. So you can make that sort of research fun. I was really striving for authenticity, so those sorts of things were fun, but it was like a field trip. I chose Dutch Harbor because Dutch Harbor for commercial fishing in Alaska, and really the nation, is the center of the universe. There's more fish that cross the docks in Dutch Harbor than anywhere else in the United States, by a lot. And that's because the Bering Sea has the densest population of fish in the world. You have to share it with Russia, but there are lots of plants in Dutch Harbor. It is also very remote. And that, I thought, brought a contextual quality to character development. People that live there are rugged. They are self-sufficient. Qualities that go for interesting and colorful characters. So I chose Dutch Harbor for those reasons. I was less familiar with it than I was with Kodiak, where I lived for 7 or 8 years. But it was just an exciting remote place. 800 miles from civilization, halfway to Russia.
Yes, and a lot of our partners know of it because our fishermen go up there often every summer to go fish in that area, or winter. Lots of partners, commercial fishermen, have Alaska fishermen. So, and personally, I've never been to Alaska. I've hoped to go this summer is my fingers crossed moment. My plan was 2020, but we know how that goes. So, hopefully it's coming back. But so getting to writing your characters, who was the hardest character to write and why?
That was the arch villain, and the arch villain was very tough to write because you're not sure how much information to give up. You have to leave enough clues so that it's reasonable. The arch villain doesn't just come out of the blue with absolutely no cookie crumbs left behind, or the reader is going to feel cheated, you know. So how many cookie crumbs do you leave? How does that character, the character has to be featured prominently. There has to be, and there has to be surprise. That's called the payoff. In the ending chapter, this is the payoff. Everybody wants to know who did it, right? And why. And it has to be clever. It has to be a surprise, and it can't be an ambush. So crafting that character and how that character interacts in the plot was the hardest part for me.
And
I
so,
rewrote it many times.
and did you get feedback from your writers groups as to this is too many crumbs, this isn't enough, there isn't enough crumb situation here? How did you figure that out?
I had, in addition to my writing group, which is primarily where I read first drafts, I also had a beta group of readers where when I had finished the whole book and done enough revisions that I felt it was in pretty good shape. I had a group of about 10 beta readers that I used either for their expertise. A lot of fishermen, veterinarian. There were people who read a lot of books. There were writers. I had a nice mix in there. The one thing they had in common is that I knew they were the type of people that would be candid with me. I didn't, I bring it on. Tell me the problems, and so that's where I got that type of feedback. My writers group did too, but they were looking mostly at first drafts. I didn't really want to bore them with revision after revision. So it's very important to do that because you get so tangled up in the weeds, you can't see a major plot hole. You get so tangled up in it that you need help in seeing what's there and what's not.
And so whenever you got that feedback, was there some feedback that you didn't agree with and that you were like, no, I'm going to keep it like it is? Like, and was it difficult to choose, what you wanted to keep and what you were going to get rid of?
Let's see. Most of the feedback was questions. I gave them a survey question too, so it made it easier. Asked them about the characters, about the plot. Were you surprised at the end? All the things that we have talked about. And so they could just answer yes or no and put 1 to 5 on there. And that really helped me in steering me towards problem areas in the book. You'd see, okay, nobody liked this character, or no, it was very helpful in building characters and identifying plot holes. So I can't think of, there were some things I disagreed with, but other things were real eye openers. And so I can't thank those people enough, that they gave me their time and their honesty and really helped make it a better book, especially my husband. I mean, and our sons, they were great too. But my husband, I was a fishing boat captain for years. So I'd say, I want this boat. I want all the electronics to go out in this boat. I want it to go dark, but the engine's got to run, right? And he knew exactly what needed to happen. I mean, I was a deckhand. He was an engineer and a boat captain, so he knew what needed to happen, and that was great. So I sound really smart in the book, but that's in terms of fishing the engine rooms and whatnot and gear. But that's because of my husband.
That's so smart. Not only, I mean, it is smart because you're, putting yourself out there and saying, how can I improve? Who do I talk to make this legitimate? And also the idea of giving them a survey is so brilliant. I've never even thought about that before, but just to get to the point of what do you need most help with? What is, what kind of feedback you're really looking for? I love that takeaway. So heck yeah, I'm taking that one. I'm putting that one in my pocket. So how much of your life did you infuse into the book? Your main character, Dr. Mo, is he similar to you? Is he different? Who where are you in the book, if at all?
Well, first of all, Dr. Mo is a woman.
Oh, sorry. Okay, first of all, that's my bias. Let
Well,
me just stop.
that's okay. Mo is short for
I'll
Maureen. So,
ah
and she's the protagonist. I'm not a veterinarian. She's a veterinarian. She has red hair. I don't. Um, and I don't, sneak around in dark places trying to solve murders. Um, but the similarity is that her age, which is her early 30s, was my age when I went to Alaska. And what I utilized there was the freshness of seeing Alaska for the first time, and the freshness of being on a fishing boat and being very observant. When you're first out there, you really pay attention to be able to understand what's going on. And that was really helpful to me because I wanted Alaska and commercial fishing to be authentic and a real part of the book. I wanted the reader to walk away from reading this book knowing a lot more about Alaska and commercial fishing without being lectured or without them even know it. They just walk away and they learned a lot about those two items. And so that freshness of seeing Alaskan commercial fishing for the first time is the way in which the protagonist and I are most alike.
mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I'm also really embarrassed that I assumed it was a guy. What in the heck? I mean, yeah, that's terrible. Thank you for having a main character woman doctor in the book. That's great. Makes me want to read it even more. So for any aspiring authors out there, how do you recommend they get started with any idea that they have in their head?
Well, have it be something that they are interested in or they love. Maybe there's some Greek myth they like that they might want to transfer to the modern day times. I don't know. To me, it was very clear that I wanted to write about something I already knew. I didn't want to do research. I was passionate about commercial fishing, passionate about Alaska, and you got to have passion about what you're writing. And I didn't know the ending of the book when I started. I was about a quarter of the way through the book, writing scene by scene, and I didn't know the ending of the book until I was about a quarter of the way through. I said, if you don't know where you're going, any path will do, and you're just going to get lost in the swamp. So then I wrote the last chapter. And then I had somewhere to land. And so then I started doing my little thing, sitting down with the scene, writing the scene, heading in that direction, and so I found that really helpful. But you're talking to a pantser. I was very comfortable not knowing how I was going to get there, though I did find knowing where I was going was very helpful. But plotters are very different, and people, need guideposts or they'll get lost in the swamp. Everybody's different. That's what was fun for me. I like the adventure.
Yeah, I love that. There's no right or wrong way to do it. You just sit down and start writing anything.
Yeah,
Just start writing.
pick something you're passionate about. I chose, a crime mystery because those are the books I like. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to write an epic family novel. Or I wasn't going to write nonfiction. I wrote what I was passionate about. So
Love that.
go for it. Passion.
Yes.
That's the word.
I love it. And to advocate for writing as well. I love writing because you can do it anywhere. You don't need fancy tools to get your ideas out. And it's something God willing that you can do for the rest of your life. You can do it sitting down. You can do it standing up. You can, you know what I mean? Like if throughout your life, you can have that writing is so personally that can be your hobby. That can be your passion to carry with you for years, for your whole life. And that's something you can always fall back on. And I think, as partners of commercial fishermen, one of my biggest tips that I tell women that are just getting into this lifestyle is to find something that you enjoy doing, whether they're home or not. Like, it is something that is yours and only yours. And for me, writing is it because it's just so accessible at any time. And so, and you were a partner of a commercial fisherman after your experience, not only fishing, but meeting the love of your life on the boat. And so how long did you fish? And then after you fished, your husband was still on the same boat, and was he a career fisherman?
Yes, he was a career fisherman, but we survived the rocky road of being married and surviving the perils of commercial fishing, being away from home a lot and whatnot, and raising a family by taking turns. We took turns. So when we started a family, we have 2 sons, pretty close together in age. I obviously stopped fishing. I went back to journalism, though I wrote for fishing trade journals. It was all fishing business. I had a radio show and a column that was in a lot of Alaska newspapers about commercial fishing. So we were tied together with that constant communication about fishing in both of our lives. And so we did that for a few years. And then I was offered a job as fishery specialist for the state of Alaska. And I really wanted to do this job because it was issues that I wrote about, and now I could actually do something about. It was pretty exciting stuff. And he knew that. And so we moved across the Gulf of Alaska to Juneau. And he took over primary care of the kids. I mean, he still, he worked construction jobs and he bought a salmon boat. So he'd go fishing in the summertime. And then I would take over in the summertime. And then kids were old enough to go fishing with them. And then when I ended up working for a fishing company, we moved to Seattle, he went back to deep sea fishing. And I was home with the kids while he was up in the Bering Sea. So we would take turns being the one who kept the home fires burning the most, and we supported each other, and it worked out to both our advantage.
That's beautiful.
But I do have a couple of recommendations for people. Your audience may already know this stuff, but I'll tell you a couple of things that really helped me, because uncertainty is the biggest goblin when your husband or your partner is away fishing. And, that's uncertainty about weather primarily. And so, well, first I want to say it's much safer to be a commercial fisherman today than it was a couple of decades ago. I mean, the changes in weather forecasting, and fishery management and have really changed, and the partnerships with the Coast Guard, it's much safer. But nonetheless, there's uncertainty out there. So 2 apps I highly recommend. One is called Marine Traffic. And these are free, or they're cost a few bucks. Marine Traffic is so much fun. You get on there, you punch in your partner's fishing boat, and you can see exactly where it is. You can see what the speed of the boat. You can tell if they're hauling gear or traveling. And you can see all the boats around. You can see who they're fishing with. You could see every fish on the globe. You can move it over to Asia and look at the boats over there. You could see the container ships, where they're going. It's really fun. But that way you know exactly what's going on. And then you put that in combination with the app called Windy, which is a great weather app where you could see not only the wind speed, but the wave height, and it's all in a color meteorological map. You can see the red storm system coming up the coast, and you can move it 5 days ahead or something and see where it's going to arrive, see what's going to be happening where your partner's fishing boat is. And at that time, they'll probably be in port, right? So, but I found those 2 things very important. Another thing I did, I always had fishing charts. I love charts, and I'm totally fascinated by them. But even if you're not fascinated by them, it's nice to have one and sit down with your partner. They can show you where they fish, why they're fishing there. It's something more to talk about at the dinner table. And I used to go down to the boat all the time when it came in. I knew everybody worked on the boat. I knew the captain before my husband was the captain. It's nice to look at the boat, see if it's ship shape. If it's ship shape, it's well maintained. So, it just kept the connection alive. And so it was interesting for both of us. We love talking about fishing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love both of those apps. I have both of those on my phone. Love Windy. That one's a really interesting app, even just for at home when there's hurricane season in the South, I'm like, where's this hurricane coming from? And then the marine tracker, it's funny because our community is split. It's either, you know exactly where your fisherman is, or you have no clue and you're fine with that. So I feel like there's people who are information is better, and others it's, not out of sight, out of mind, but just like out of sight, not worrying about it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, but yes, the marine tracker, I love that they are free. That's great advice. Thank you for that. The POCF experience, and how beautiful and respectful and supportive that you and your husband were able to trade off like that and just give each other what you both needed at that time, and to help your own personal development. It's just really touching. Love that. Okay. This is kind of a side question, but I have to ask, what is this elbow room all about? I am so intrigued by this place. What was it? Who, what? Tell us, bring us there.
Well, the elbow room is the Alaska fishing industry equivalent of the OK Corral. It is the legend that encapsulates the Wild West portion of commercial fishing, which was very prevalent in Alaska during the crab boom days and whatnot of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is when the elbow room flourished in its wildest stages. It no longer exists, but it was in an old residential house, one-story little house with peeling blue paint, and a gravel road just past the Russian Orthodox Church. And, it looked out, there's a picture window that looked out onto the water. You could see every boat that was going out of the harbor and heading into the Bering Sea had to pass in front of that picture window. And, so it wasn't that large. It was a house with like 3 big rooms in it. And, it would have booths. People would have pitchers of beer and whiskey or whatever they're drinking. It had a dance floor. It had a tiny little stage. There were bands there. And there was obviously a lot of money and a lot of booze. And so there was a lot of brawling that went. People just take the people brawling, throw them outside, work it out or whatever. So there's lots of stories like that about it. And some of them I've included in my book. There's several chapters that occur in the elbow room, including the final scene is a big brawling scene in the elbow room. But personally, my experience in the elbow room is quite different. I mean, I've been in there when it's been really crowded, people are really rowdy and stuff like that. But I've also been in there on the 4th of July. It was quite quiet. It's in the afternoon. And it's the place I first danced with my future husband.
Oh. It's romantic.
So it's kind of ironic, but it had a small local feel there that was intimate when it wasn't brawling, and that's the way I used it. People that are regulars, a local bar is like an extension of their living room, and in this case, the bartender at the elbow room is a pretty prominent character, a real pal of Maureen's, and her other pal is the manager of the Bering Sea crab fishery. So it pulls in these elements, and they all work together in their crazy way to help unravel the 2 murders. One, and which makes it a little difficult for her because as the evidence mounts up, her romantic relationship with a fishing boat captain is upended because he becomes a prime suspect in one of the murders.
Wow.
So she has to kind of untangle that. And she has her own doubts and has to kind of figure that out and find out what happens in the ending.
Oh my gosh, cannot wait to read your book. This is also would be such a great book to send to your fishermen when they're out in Bristol Bay or wherever. You know, we love to send care packages, and throwing your book in there sounds like a great addition to that. And I love that the elbow room, you know, in your experience, it's like you can either foster love or a black eye, and you were able to foster that love with your future.
Yeah, I think I've only been in the elbow room with him twice. Both of them were not rowdy times. Other times I've been there was more rowdy. But anyway, interesting place. Glad I got to have my memory from the OK Corral.
Yeah, love it. Checked off the list. Okay, so what other projects are you currently working on, or are you working on anything specific right now?
Well, I'm writing the second book. This is a series of 3. So it'll have the same, pretty much the same core characters, be in Dutch Harbor, just different victims and a different plot line. But it's fun to write. It's a lot easier because now I really know my characters. It took me a while to get to know them. After a while they begin to speak to you and say, "No, I would not say that. No, I would not do that." And that's fun too. But I know them now, so it's so much easier for me to write. And now I know what I'm doing. Before I was learning at the same time I was doing, and I'm still learning now, but at least I know how to navigate.
Yeah. And speaking of that, because there's several characters, and for some writers, dialogue can be an issue. And when I say some writers, I mean me. So I'm wondering, is it easy for you to just spit out the dialogue with different types of characters, different genders, or are you basing them off of, a friend or somebody that like how they speak? Like, what was helpful for you to develop that type of dialogue for each person?
That's hard to do. It's hard to do because I didn't model any of my characters on a specific person. I tried that out, but it didn't feel comfortable. And so I basically as I got to know my characters more, I would change the dialogue so it would be more reflective of them. So, for instance, the protagonist, Maureen, the veterinarian, her best buddy is Patsy, who is manager of the Bering Sea crab fishery, and Patsy is quite a tough character. And but in the beginning, the first draft, they sounded very similar, except Patsy swore a little bit more. But as I went through the many revisions and the two characters became more clear to me, they spoke to me, I could have their dialogue be much different. And so I'm sure people have different processes in doing this. But I can't imagine writing a book without having your characters come to life as you're writing it, because you think about them all the time. They become real people to you and they speak to you. And so pretty soon you'll be able to get their dialect, their sentence structure starts to become more distinct. So probably someone who could give much better advice on how to do that. That's just my individual path.
I love that, though, that the fact that you had two characters that were so similar and then you were able to lean in into their individuality and really make it speak. Have you read the book On Writing by Stephen King by any chance?
I haven't. I've seen him talk about the writing process in, YouTube videos.
The book, if anybody's interested, that book, I read it often. Often as in maybe once a year, but man, it's so good. He talks a lot about what we were talking about today, but just the act of writing, how it's, how do you even explain it? You know, you're sitting down with nothing and then you end up with an entire world. You know, it's very sixth sense, divine intervention, cosmic, you know, all that stuff. It sounds crazy, but I mean, honestly, like the creative process is so, it's so personal that you just have to feel it, right? So you're just sitting there and you're going deeper, you're talking about your character development and these people becoming real. And it's how exciting to be able to create that kind of a life, not even on the page, but just for yourself, you know. It's just to be able to enjoy yourself with
Mhm.
people that you've created out of thin air. It's just magic. It's awesome. I love
Well, one
that.
thing I found out about myself is how conflict adverse I was, you know, and I've had jobs that are adversarial in the regulatory process. I never thought of myself as being conflict adverse, but I kept rescuing people, rescuing which is the worst thing you can do. And I'd have to back off and say, "Oh no, just she's in trouble here. She's gonna have to get herself out." Or as Kurt Vonnegut say, you dig a hole, you throw your heroine in there, and they have to dig themselves out by the end of the book. And you have to conflict is such an important part of every scene. You know, and you don't have to have a brawl. It could be an emotional thing, something they have to solve that allows you to get to know them better and also to move the story forward. But I was surprised. I mean, it's a very important lesson. I was surprised I had to learn it.
Yeah, that's amazing to think that, you know, that you can learn more about yourself just for writing something that maybe you don't think is you, you know? And okay, so you're writing 3 books. Congratulations on that. That is such an awesome achievement to know that you have 2 more to come. Did your publishers, when you signed with them, or when you were with your agent, was that part of the pitch that this was going to be a 3-part series? Was this a recommendation from them, or how did that develop?
Both. I mean, I had planned to write a series. I didn't want it to be a long series at the end of my career. And I like to have fun too. It's just not my job. But that was important to them. The agents felt that was important for them to sell to the publisher because, readers like your book. If they like your book, they want to know there's another one they can come back to, and that will sell even more. And I'm that way too. I find an author I like, and I'll go back and read every book they wrote. One of my favorite series is the Longmire series, and I think he wrote about close to 20 in that series. And it's always an easy, I just pull one out and read it and I know I'm going to enjoy it. So yeah, that is important. They really like series.
Yeah, I've heard that, like, always have a book in the drawer. Even, you know, with your
Mhm.
book, you always have something else that you can pitch to them as well. That's great. So, the most important thing, how do people buy your book? Where can we get it?
Well, you can buy it on Amazon and any other site, Barnes and Noble, whatnot. You're not going to find it in your local bookstore. There's not many books that make it that far, um, but can buy it online quite easily.
Nice. Okay, so
And so
Amazon.
it's available in paperback or the ebook version. So
Okay, great. So Death in Dutch Harbor, y'all. I want to put all this in the show notes too, so people can easily grab it, because that's what I'm going to do right after I hang up this call. And thank you so much for your time. And I'm wondering, what do you hope that people take away from our conversation?
I'm very cognizant of the audience that I'm speaking to now, and you're cognizant of an audience when you're writing a book too. When I wrote this book, my audience was people involved either directly or tangentially in the commercial fishing business, because I wanted it to be authentic. But I wanted to write it so everybody would enjoy it. But if it didn't pass muster with that audience, I wasn't going to be happy. So I think for your readers, they will enjoy this. This is and if they have any interest in Alaska, they'll enjoy it as well. So the other message would be, love your life as being part of the fishing industry. It's completely unique. And if you're so inclined, use it to write a wonderful book, or a short story. If you're, commercial fishing is a seasonal business, use that to your advantage, throw it in a drawer when you're done, or maybe not, a commercial fishing story written by a commercial fisherman, I think, carries a lot of weight with it, and just have fun
I
with
love
it.
that.
But writing is not as difficult as it seems. Give it a try.
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful. Even inspired me to say that if anybody has a short story they want to write, I would love to help publish it on my blog, POCFpride.com, so you can see it and on there and just start. Now you have a reference. You can refer to that. But yeah, anything to help people expand their creativity and put that pen to page is amazing. So I appreciate so much your time and your art. I can't wait to read your book. Thank you so much, Donna.
It was my pleasure, Megan. It was a lot of fun talking to you and addressing your audience. I'm there with you.
Thank you. Same here. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for being here. Your downloads, your reviews mean more than you know, because that's how we know that you are enjoying the podcast. And if you'd like to further support the community, you can tap the subscribe button, share with family and friends, post on socials, or write a review. But you know what? As long as you're getting value, that is all that matters. But if you go that extra step, we truly, truly appreciate it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you're a partner of a commercial fisherman looking for more resources on how to navigate this unique lifestyle, from long distance dating to communication to finances to motherhood advice to mental health, safety, all the things. We're building more resources on succession planning and retirement. It's going to be amazing. There's even an option to join the private forum as well if you jump onto POCFpride.com to learn more. We are there for you. We got all of the community and all of the resources you need, and they are continuing to grow as we learn what you need the most. We can't wait to connect with you, and thank you so much again for being here. I'm sharing a review from a forum member because this is really driving home how incredibly valuable and resourceful it is to have that kind of intimate community inside the private forum. So here we go. She says, "Thank you so much for your advice. It actually made me cry. Thank you so much for your support. I don't have that here in the middle of Missouri where this lifestyle isn't a thing. It really means a lot." And that message really meant a lot to me because that just shows how connected we are throughout the world, throughout the country, whether we're near a harbor or not. And also things arise all the time and you just don't know where to turn. You don't know who to ask because many of your friends and family probably maybe don't even know how to relate, or they maybe can relate in a different way and it's not exactly the support that you're looking for. That is what you can find. Or no, not that. You can find the opposite in our forum. Our forum is just so full of love, so full of women who know what it's like, who have been there and can offer support to help you whenever you need it. I am there to offer one-on-one support as well. And it's just really incredible to get to know y'all and to also understand what kind of resources that you need that I can research and find for you and cultivate for our incredible community. So if you want to join in on this beautiful group that we have, you can go to meganwaldrop.com/private-forum to learn more. That's meganwaldrop.com/private-forum. Hope to see you in there. Thanks for listening today. Being here means you're a part of the POCF family, and we wouldn't be a community without you. I'm Megan, and this is the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast. As always, much love, POCF pride, and remember, you are not alone.